welcome Amit Gupta.
On September 22nd, 2011, my iPhone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered it. And on the other end, I heard the voice of a man I recognized. I'd seen him just the day before. He'd been wearing cowboy boots. He always wore cowboy boots. But that day he sounded nervous. And then he told me that I was going to die. But this story starts years before that. In the summer of 1999, I called my parents from Boston, and I told them I was dropping out of college. It was the internet boom, and I wanted in. So I'd started this company out of my dorm room, moved it to this ping pong table in my parents' garage, and I learned how to write a business plan. I started having meetings with venture capitalists, and at 19 years old, I raised $1.5 million. And my company didn't make any money. But we were growing fast. And we were in the Wall Street Journal and the Rolling Stone, and we had major car companies as advertisers, and I was working on this thing day and night. I loved it. I think that picture up there is me stealing internet from the company next door. At one point, we had stuck this IKEA bunk bed in the foam closet, so I wouldn't have to bother to go home to sleep. So I loved what I was doing, and I was having a blast doing it. And then the dot-com bubble burst, and the VCs ran scared, and still 19 years old, I learned how you're supposed to lay someone off so that they're least likely to become violent. And then I laid off 20 of my friends. And the 7 of us that remained, we spent the next year getting the company back to break even. It was a brutal introduction to business. At the end of that year, I went back to school with my tail between my legs. But Photojojo was different. It was 2006. I was living in New York City. I saw all my friends getting digital cameras, taking hundreds, sometimes thousands of photos a year. And so my idea was really simple. I was just going to come up with tips, tutorials, things to do with your photos, and email them to people. It was just an email newsletter. And I didn't raise a bunch of money. I didn't hire a bunch of people. I didn't even think of it as a startup at first. It was just a side project. And a few months down the line, I added a PayPal buy button to the site, and we had our first online store. And we started selling 5, sometimes 10 things in a day. And it was so exciting when we sold 10 things in a day. Like, that was amazing. And my roommate was helping out. My mom started helping out. She still works at Photojojo. And that Christmas, things got crazy. It was insane. Like, we went from 5 orders in a day, 5 orders that I'd pack on my kitchen table in Manhattan and wheel to the 24-hour post office at 2 in the morning every day. And we got to 500 orders in a day. And we moved our fulfillment center from that kitchen table in New York to my parents' garage again. And I started to take this minivan, fill it full of boxes, and take it back and forth between the house and the post office. And it was around that time that I decided to move to San Francisco. Now, San Francisco had always had this dream-like quality in my mind. It was like the place where if you were in tech, you were supposed to go to make a dent in the universe. And so, well, I actually vividly remember this time. Right after college, I took this road trip across the country to San Francisco and back. But the highlight of the entire trip was when we got to San Francisco, because when we got to San Francisco, my friend Mike called me, and Mike said that he knew where Steve Jobs lived. So of course I got to Palo Alto as fast as I could, and I got in Mike's car and I slammed the door. And then it turned out that Mike didn't know where Steve Jobs lived. But we drove around Palo Alto anyway for like an hour, and then we found it. We found where Steve Jobs lived. And we parked Mike's car like 2 blocks away, and as nonchalantly as two 20-something techies could do, we kind of sauntered by Steve's house once and then twice, kind of peeking down to see if we could spot him from the sidewalk. And on the third trip by, because yes, we walked by 3 times, I spotted a newspaper on Steve Jobs' recycling bin, and I snatched it without really thinking about it. And I still have it. So it's all just to say that San Francisco had kind of this mythical quality in my mind. So that's really his address, by the way. When I decided to move there, it was because I was ready to take Photojojo seriously. It wasn't just going to be a side project anymore. It wasn't even going to be a startup. I wanted it to be a company. I wanted it to last. And it was working. Around that time, we wrote our book, and we published it with Random House. The book did well. We went on all these morning shows on the major networks to promote it. We started shipping lots and lots more orders, and sales were going up. Our customers would send us love notes. We'd ship these plastic dinosaurs with every order that we shipped, and then people would name these dinosaurs and collect families of these dinosaurs and send us photos of them next to the Eiffel Tower and all over the world. And we'd host these photo walks where we'd just tell people to come out and take photos with us in San Francisco or New York or Las Vegas, and then cops would yell at us because we had 150 people that would just show up and be blocking traffic, taking photos. And when I hired people, I told them this was different, because it was. It was bootstrapped, and I was cautious, and before I even put up a job listing, I saved up a whole year's worth of that person's salary because I never wanted to have to lay off anyone ever again. And so it took us, I think, 3 years to get to our first $1 million in annual revenue, and I was so proud. And it was never about just the money, but we doubled or tripled revenues and profits every year after that. And then in 2011, we took our first workation, where we took the entire family. We just took all 15 people and we moved them to India for 3 weeks. I rented this house, and we just worked there and played there, and it was magical and wonderful. And we did it again and again every year after that in different countries. So I've been living in San Francisco for about 6 years, building the company of my dreams, building it my way, working on nothing else, thinking of nothing else. I loved everyone I worked with. And then I got this phone call. So I'd been feeling kind of sick for about a week, just a week. And I'd gone to see my doctor, and the doctor thought I had mono. So he took a blood test. This was the doctor on the phone, the guy in the cowboy boots. And now he was telling me it was not mono, it was leukemia. Now, I didn't even know what leukemia was. I have no idea. So I started going to Google, and I open up tabs, and I'm trying to figure out what is this thing, and how did I get it, and am I gonna die? And what I find out is not good. Leukemia is a blood cancer, which means that the cancer is everywhere in my body, and the kind I have, acute myeloid leukemia, is very aggressive, which means that if I don't start treatment today, I'm gonna be dead in 2 weeks. So I decided to start treatment, and I'm going to do it on the East Coast, I decided, so I'll be near my parents. But I can't board a plane because I'm too weak and too susceptible to illness. I have a very weak immune system because of this. So I spend the night at California Pacific Medical Center getting bag upon bag of blood and antibiotics, and then I board the first flight the next morning with a backpack full of clothes, JetBlue to JFK. And I haven't even told my roommates. I haven't told my friends. I'm ashamed. I don't know why I'm ashamed, but I also don't know when I'm coming back or if I'm coming back. So I just sneak out of San Francisco. I just take that backpack and I get on this plane, and I remember shivering the entire way to New York because it was so cold on that flight. And we landed at JFK, and my parents picked me up. And it took 3 hours to get to New Haven because it was raining, the traffic was bad. And when we got there, they had this wheelchair waiting for me at Yale Smiley Cancer Center, and they sat me down in the wheelchair, and they pushed me into the elevator, and they brought me up to the 11th floor, and they pushed me into this room. And in this room, I saw a hospital bed, and behind it, a wall of machines that were supposed to keep me alive as my organs failed, and a bank of IV pumps, and a window looking out onto a busy highway. And this was my home now. And when I woke up, they started the chemo. This stuff is particularly nasty. You can see she's wearing gloves because if she gets it on her skin, it's going to burn her skin, but it's not meant to burn her skin. It's meant to burn my insides. And now I had this team of doctors, and they ran DNA tests. They ran blood tests every 3 or 4 hours, day and night, so I never got to sleep. Everything hurt. And they told me the only cure for what I had was a poison. It was chemo. Except it wasn't even a cure. If they just gave me chemo, this thing was coming back, and when it came back, there was nothing they could do. Then they told me the cure was maybe a stem cell transplant, but they wouldn't tell me the odds at first. So again, I Googled, and I found out that if I had a perfectly matched stem cell donor, perfectly matched stem cells, the operation went perfectly, everything was perfect, then I had 50-50 odds of surviving 5 years. And without a transplant, the odds were not good. And the odds of finding this perfect match were about 1 in 20,000. So they checked the National Marrow Donor Program, the registry, and there was no match. And I cried. I cried for days. I felt so sorry for myself. My life was over. And why had I spent so much time on Facebook and on Twitter? When I had all the freedom I would never have again, I was thumbing through social feeds on my phone. I was so pissed off at myself. And I saw those people outside the window in my room on that busy road every evening, stuck in traffic, breathing exhaust fumes. And I wanted nothing more than to be one of them, because what they had was so much better than what I had in store for me. And I had regrets. I'd lived a good life. I'd done lots of stuff I wanted to do, but there were so many places I'd never been and things I'd never get to do. I'd always wanted to adopt a dog. I'd always wanted to learn how to meditate. I'd forgotten how to draw. My whole life I'd wanted a DeLorean. I'd never have any of that. And what about Photojojo? I had devoted 6 years of my life to it, and it had been my dream. And I had left it behind without saying a word of goodbye. And I had no investors, no co-founders, nobody that was guaranteed to step up and make sure things were going to be okay. So I wrote a will from my hospital bed. I was 32 years old. I executed a power of attorney so my mom could take care of things after I was gone. I settled my affairs. They told me to. I wrote an email to my friends, to my family, telling them what was happening. And then something amazing happened. My friends made this website to tell people what was going on with me. And then other friends started to tweet and tumble and post on Facebook, and these posts got tens of thousands of shares and retweets and reblogs, and people started to ask how they could help. And then friends in New York and friends in San Francisco hosted the first bone marrow drives, events where people could go swab their cheeks with some Q-tips and send it to the National Marrow Donor Program to be DNA typed to see if it was a match for me or for someone else who needed a stem cell transplant. And then these drives started to pop up all over the country. And pretty soon, my room, this place that felt like a prison that I would never escape, went from being a prison to being my campaign headquarters. And every evening, we'd have this conference call where these friends who had decided to take time off work or take off their evenings to spend their time helping me stay alive were calling in, and we were updating each other on the drives they were planning on college campuses or on corporate campuses or in India, or the fundraising efforts or the press efforts. And then these news people started to come to my room to interview me wearing masks for their nightly broadcasts. And I'd be doing these interviews with NPR on the phone or on Skype with Dr. Sanjay Gupta on CNN. And then celebrities like Aziz Ansari and Chris Pratt started to make these YouTube videos to help spread the word. And all this time, 3 months are going by, and I'm getting chemo the whole time. My hair's fallen out. I'm throwing up twice a day. I can barely walk. At one point, the chemo eats away at the cornea of my eyes, and I go blind for 3 days. And I'm terrified because I've been a designer all of my life, and I can now see a future where I'm not going to be able to do my work anymore. So 3 months go by, and they find a match, a perfect match. And now I get to have this transplant. So the week before the transplant, I moved up to Dana-Farber in Boston, and for a week, they give me the highest dose of chemo that they can give to a living human being without killing them, to destroy all the cancer cells in my body. And then the day of the transplant comes, and it's completely anticlimactic. Somewhere in New York, this anonymous donor, this angel, goes to a hospital, and they hook up an IV to his right arm, and the IV goes into a machine, and the machine filters out excess stem cells in his blood and puts the blood back into his left arm. And he sits like this for 3 hours, filling up this tiny bag, and then they put this bag into an ice chest, and they put the ice chest onto a plane, and they send the plane to Boston, and someone brings the bag to Dana-Farber, and then it comes up to my room, and it goes onto this IV pole, and drip by drip, the seeds of life, very literally, are dripping into my body. And nothing happens. And this is the most painful part, because that high dose of chemo they gave me, it not only killed the cancer cells, they hope, but it also destroyed my bone marrow. So I have no ability to make blood anymore. If this doesn't work, I'm screwed. And also the effects of the chemo are just now starting to take effect, which means that the tissues in my esophagus, my mouth, my gums, everything is tearing away. So I'm extremely nauseous, more nauseous than I've ever been. And I feel like I should be used to it by now, but I'm not. And I'm in so much pain. They give me this button, and every time I push this button, it shoots morphine into my heart and through my body. And they tell me I can push it every 10 minutes. So I push it every 10 minutes. It's my best friend for 3 days. And 3 weeks go by, and we're waiting, and it starts to work. My body starts producing red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. My counts come up, and eventually they send me home, and I still have to go to the hospital every day, then every other day, then once a week. And my new blood, which came from my donor, has my donor's DNA. The rest of my body has my DNA, so I'm like this science fiction experiment. But the side effect of this is my new immune system thinks my entire body is a foreign body, so I'm on 18 different drugs to prevent it from killing me. And it takes me about a year to recover. And for the first 100 days, I'm in isolation, which means that I can't go anywhere but the hospital in a clean room environment. I can't eat out. I can't eat fresh fruits and vegetables. Everything has to be heavily cooked. I'm basically like a newborn baby. I'm susceptible to illness. I don't have my immunizations, but I'm alive. I'm alive. And I have 50-50 odds of staying that way. So a year after I left, I'm back. I'm back in San Francisco. And that's when I realized that I don't want to be there anymore. I don't want to be there anymore. And I don't know why. I don't know if I'm just burnt out and I need something new, or if the effects of the chemo are what's doing this. I'm still slumped over by 2 o'clock in the afternoon with fatigue and I can barely do my job. Or if San Francisco has changed and maybe I don't care about the same things that people there care about anymore. But what I do realize is that I can't run Photojojo this way. My heart's not in it, and I left once before without a backup plan, and this time I need one. So I spend the next year hiring people to fill our holes, improving our processes, having meeting after meeting after meeting. My goal is to make myself unnecessary. I want to make sure that if I don't survive, Photojojo does. And this whole year, my stomach is in knots, and I'm always nervous because I feel like I'm living this double life. Because all day long, I kind of had to pretend like everything's okay, and I'm glad to be back, but I know that I'm really planning my escape. And then I find someone. I spend a year, I meet his kids, I stay with his family, I get to know him and trust him. And then, June 2nd of last year, I do something I never thought I could do. I sell Photojojo. I sell my dream. And in November, I sell or give away everything I own, and I leave San Francisco. So what now? Well, Photojojo is doing well. Jen Gies, who is my protege for 4 or 5 years, is now the CEO. The company's grown. They've moved to new offices. They're about to launch a new brand called Parabel. They're doing great without me, and that makes me really proud. And as for me, I've been knocking off some of the things on my bucket list. I've done some traveling. I finally went and took those drawing lessons. I went to India and I took a 10-day silent meditation retreat. I still don't know how to meditate, but I'm trying. I finally adopted that dog. Her name is Leah, and I love her to death. And I haven't gotten that DeLorean yet, but I did get this sweet motorcycle and I took it across the country. And finally, I got to take one last workation with Team Photojojo to Costa Rica, which really meant a lot to me. But going back to this Joseph Campbell quote in the beginning, I let go of the life that I've been planning. So what's the life that's waiting for me? I have no idea. And this is the hardest part. This is the most painful part so far, because I don't know what my life is supposed to be about now. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And every instinct tells me that I should be working at this and working to figure this stuff out, but I'm only starting to realize that maybe this is something that I can't work myself out of. Maybe I just need to be okay with being here right now and not knowing. And I've never been a religious person, but I think that this is the closest I've ever come to faith. And I feel like this is the part in the talk where I'm supposed to give you a bunch of pithy takeaways and life lessons, ways to take what I learned and apply it to your life. And I can tell you that the story doesn't always end the way you think it's going to. Sometimes you find the work that you've always wanted to do, and you're doing it with the people you've always dreamed of working with, and you still have to let it go, and it's okay. And I can tell you that if your work is important to you, and I think that for a lot of people in this room it probably is, that you've got to plan for the day that you're not going to be able to do it anymore. Because one way or another, that day comes for all of us. And I can remind you that you don't get forever. We spend so much time trying to extend our lives by eating better, exercising, using a standing desk. It works. You should use one. But we spend so little time thinking about how to make better use of the time we do get. But the thing about life advice is that it's hard to follow and there's too much of it. So I'll just point out that you already know. You already know the best life advice for yourself, but you're probably not following it. So before I go, I just have one thing to ask. I want everyone to close their eyes. Right now, just close your eyes. I can tell if your eyes are not closed. And I'll tell you when to open them. And I want you to imagine that you got that call from the man in the cowboy boots, what would you regret? What are 3 things you'd regret? Maybe there's someone you've never told how you felt about them. Maybe there's a project you never finished or a place you always wanted to go. What are those 3 things? And is there one in those 3 things that you could start when you get home from this next week? Just one. All right, you can open your eyes. So this is the last thing, I promise. I want everyone to just stand up for a second. Just stand up. And just take 30 seconds, turn to one of your neighbors and tell them that one thing that you're going to start when you get home next week. Now. Thank you, guys. Listen, one last thing. Thank you. I would love to hear when you do these things. I'm still on Twitter, unfortunately, so you can tweet at me. Or you can email me, or I just moved to Portland a week ago. If you're in the area, I'd love to meet you. Do those things. Thank you so much.
Amit Gupta.